I'd like to introduce Emily Pohl-Weary, who is a writer, a teacher, a social entrepreneur in the form of the Academy of the Impossible. And since she's clearly coming up to begin, I won't give any more of a flowery intro, but turn it over to Emily.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here and to learn about the things that are going on in the community here. I wonder, should we close the door or give it a few minutes? So just before I move on with this slide, that image there was created by one of the youth in my writing group, Toronto Street Writers. And I love it because she took essentially a photograph which she used of a very sort of barren landscape in the area where we have the academy and put her poetry above it and suddenly transformed it. And I feel like that's what we as writers get to do every day. And I thought I would speak a little bit about, well, what I call my day job, which is writing. I have 5 books published, 2 novels for young women, one actually for very young women, 10 to 12-year-olds, and one that is mostly read by 18 to 24-year-olds. And a biography, you can see the covers of my books up there, a biography of my grandmother's life, which was fortunate enough to win the Hugo Award. She started it and I finished it after about 4 years of sorting through her letters and scraps of essays she'd written and that kind of thing. And an anthology about female superheroes. So what do they all have in common? My philosophy around writing is to essentially follow my bliss. Whatever is interesting enough for me to feel like I can stick with it for 3 to 4 years, which is how long it takes to write a book. It's also how long it takes to finish high school, get a degree, a bachelor's degree. So, at a good marriage lasts longer than that. But, it's a good amount of time. You really have to stick with it and feel like you're so in love with the topic, the subject, the characters, that you won't get bored. And that's how I basically base my decisions about what I'm going to write next. My 6th book's coming out next year. It's about a female monster, a female werewolf, who goes from being a vegetarian to suddenly wanting to eat her boyfriend, which is kind of fun. It was really fun to write. And again, it's that thing of follow whatever is exciting to you because you will be good at it. And that philosophy, as you'll see, works in all aspects of my career. I kind of apply it to everything I do. I've run a literary magazine. It was called Kiss Machine. I've acquired content for high school textbooks, and I've edited novels. My first job was editing, well, copy editing. If you're an editor and you know the different kinds of editing, copy editing articles for the local entertainment weekly in Toronto called Now Magazine. But in 2008. It's been very interesting today to hear about, multiple careers, changing careers throughout your life. And I feel like my career's always stayed the same, but within it there's been many different phases. So in 2008 I began something different, which was running writing workshops for at-risk youth. It started in the neighborhood where I grew up, which is called Parkdale. It's in West End, Toronto. And because I know the reputation Toronto has outside Toronto, I'm going to try not to make this too Toronto specific, the talk, but it's only important in that I started in the neighborhood where I grew up. I looked around at the youth in the area and saw how they were struggling, specifically my own brother, who's quite a bit younger than me, and his friends. And I think it also came up in one of the discussions this morning, the one that I was at upstairs, about different learning styles and how boys are really struggling in school. So what I was seeing when I was looking around was many of my brother's friends couldn't read. And I thought this was just astounding, growing up in downtown Toronto today. And I thought, something's wrong with the way we're teaching them to read. If they're not learning to read, something's got to be wrong. I mean, after all those years of just sitting in a classroom, So I started to think about what would have encouraged me, what did encourage me to love reading and writing when I was young. And I thought about it so hard that eventually I convinced myself I should try to run a writing group for youth that put some of these ideas and practices into place. So these are some nice photos down here of some of the youth who've been in the Toronto Street Writers over the years. You can see they're not children, they're 16 to 29. And they come from basically every cultural, religious background you can think of that is in Toronto. And they come together once a week on Tuesdays to write. The only thing that we have in common is, let's say, a desire to tell our stories or to speak up or to learn more about how to communicate. I was so inspired by this woman named Rita Cox, who was a local librarian, the children's librarian at my public library branch, the Parkdale Library, that I decided we had to start off in the library. We met in this basement room with no windows, nothing on the walls, literally like a cement box. And it was what was inside our heads. Like, it was the ideas that we came into the room with that really brought everything alive. And 5 years later, we are now in the Academy of the Impossible, which is a permanent home for us. And it has art on the walls, and it has windows and comfortable chairs. We can leave books there, that kind of thing. It just, while I was putting this talk together, I was thinking a lot about where we started and where we are now, and it's a really nice experience. So I thank you guys for inviting me here, because you kind of lose track of that, and I feel like we all do, you know, in the day-to-day, like trying to get X, Y, and Z done. You don't take the time to think back to where you started, and we really literally were in this like cement box of a room, but we would have, you know, 25 to 30 really creative, imaginative brains in that room, and it always felt like home. And it wasn't the space, it was the people. And it wasn't, you know, what it was giving to us. It was kind of this beautiful mixture of sharing, listening, learning. And as somebody who didn't really like school, it's funny because I'm now a PhD student. I couldn't stop going to school, but grade school, high school were not my friends. I was the B student. I was the one, you know, whose report card said she daydreams too much. So when I really decided I wanted to be a writer, there was a lot of like self-esteem issues, thinking, oh, you know, I'm never the smartest kid. I'm never the one who stands out. And then, you know, when it came time to actually do this stuff, I really realized how many people out there feel the same way. And it's not about an unwillingness to learn. It's about finding the right space in which you feel safe enough to let down the guard, you know, whatever guard or whatever issues are pressing on you in order to learn. And so basically I had this motto, and I kept saying to every young person I was talking to when I was starting the Street Writers, I promise it won't be boring. If it's boring, you can have your money back. And that's a joke because it's a free program, but I would say it's not going to bore you. And if it does, tell me, because that's the last thing. I don't want to be in a room boring people, and you don't want to be in a room being bored. So I always make sure that the material, the readings I bring in, the things we talk about reflect their lives in some way. I can bring in obscure writing as long as I can figure out a way to really bring it back to their lives and to my life in a way. As I said, it was started in my community, which I think is really important. Like, if you're thinking about literacy issues here, you're thinking about artistic, you know, encouragement and growth and creativity, having something that comes kind of from the grassroots and that reflects the issues that are important to people, and it's just so important. And I guess that's part of the issue. You know, in high school, your teacher may not be able to do that because they're covering so many different aspects of things and maybe not coming from the same community. So I'm not putting down teachers at all. I've known a lot of really committed and dedicated teachers. But I feel like what was beautiful about this opportunity for me was that I only had to focus on writing and reading and storytelling, which are things that I love. So yeah, the program has been running now for 5 years. We are fortunate enough to get funding from arts councils, so that's why we have a bit of stability. And it runs now for 10 months of the year. So every Tuesday evening, 10 months of the year. And the youth who come out aren't getting money, aren't getting grades, aren't getting jobs out of this. They're coming because they want to write. Last week was our first workshop of this year, so we'll run until July. And we had 80 youth registered for the first day. Now, that sounds like a lot of people, right? And it is, but on the first day we had 40 people in the room, approximately, not 80. Because it's a free program, and I encourage people to kind of either come every week or to come back when they can in between their jobs and their other commitments. Because a lot of these youth are working and are trying to go to school or do all kinds of other things. So this brings me to another chapter of my life, which I would say, when you're thinking of reinventing yourself over and over throughout your life, I eventually realized that I wanted to learn how to speak about what we were doing in that room. And I was reading books about educational pedagogy, educational theory. And bell hooks, there's just 2 quotes here that had some meaning to me when I was, really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the street writers. So bell hooks calls on people to transform educational institutions and society so that the way we live, teach, and work can reflect our joy in cultural diversity, our passion for justice, and our love of freedom. So that's, in some ways, the way I try to approach the space with the street writers. And Pohl-Weary, if you've read any of his work, he speaks a lot about writing and communication. Only through communication can human life hold meaning. So to me, when I was looking at these youth in Parkdale, the neighborhood where I grew up, and seeing the boys getting into trouble more and more often, and my brother, I was thinking, if they can't read, how can they stand up for themselves? If they can't argue in a way that's acceptable in our society without getting into more trouble, which is politely, often with big words. If you can do that, you can usually at least get your fair share often of, or your fair shake, right? But if you can't do that, then you're at a serious disadvantage. So I was trying to apply these theories to the field of writing and literary exploration. I decided I wanted to foster a literature of the oppressed, which is like, who is it that we normally hear from when we read books? The same way that, maybe in government there's a very kind of select group of people who seem to manage to get elected. It's the same thing with books, right? It's almost always the same kind of voice. Like, not always, but often. So I wanted to figure out how to encourage a multiplicity of voices. And after a few years of doing that, I started to wonder, what impact is this group having on its participants? Why are they coming back year after year? So we have some people who've been there for 5 years now. And what is it they're getting out of it? I didn't have the words to actually say, I can see a benefit here. This young man who was in jail for 2 years for a violent crime is now feeling, more confident, speaks up, doesn't assume that everybody's out to get him when he's on the street talking to them. But I didn't necessarily have a vocabulary or a kind of a way to make my case. This kind of a program should be run in jails. This kind of a program should be run for youth in care. This kind of a program should be run in high needs communities, in government housing complexes for the youth there who are dealing with violence and trauma on a daily basis. So that's literally what I'm studying right now at the University of Toronto. Does this kind of a teaching practice, specifically with relation to writing, does it empower people? And how does it empower people? So with all this in my head, I started thinking a lot about how we could take the beautiful kind of respect and closeness and warmth and safety of a space like the Toronto Street Writers, which is just one group, and apply that to a larger organization, which is called the Academy of the Impossible. So we literally tried to bottle what we had in the Street Writers and replicate, like apply that to all these other groups and events and workshops that we run there. Yeah, so I don't know, there have been a lot of photos here, like throughout the presentation so far, and many of them were taken at the Academy. We run all different kinds of programs, but what they share is an interest on the part of someone or a group of someone's to learn something. And we joke that it could be learning how to fly, hence our logo, the flying anvil. But really what it is it's, media production, writing, about politics. We've had a program called Campaign School that brings in local politicians. And we essentially break down our social business into two parts. There's the arts programming under Impossible Arts, which runs the Street Writers, things like a hip-hop program, a film program, a reading series, all kind of what I like to think of as kind of, I used the word grassroots earlier, but ground up. So like bottom up, in that it comes from the people in the community asking to learn more about these particular things. And our job as the facilitator, as the executive director of this space, is to respond. If enough people make a request to learn how to write movies, we make sure that we provide an intensive workshop on writing movies. If enough people say they don't know how to get into politics and they want to run for politics, for city politics, but don't think that it's really a feasible goal, we say, well, how can it become a feasible goal? And so MetaViews is the business and research partner who focus more on the things like campaign school or media production, the business aspects of things, the research. There's a lot of things like technology and device beta testing in the space, like wacky, unusual ideas that are brilliant, but are at that stage where people are going from, oh, I've got this great idea, to actually creating something that works and that sells. They come into the Academy and they get all these brilliant young minds basically kind of drilling them on aspects of their ideas. So that's kind of the idea incubation aspect of the Academy, in that anybody is open to pitch an idea for that particular series. It's called Test the Impossible. And they come in, and whoever's there that day will focus in a very generous kind of way on their ideas. And it's a fantastic thing. It could be, I want to start a X kind of business, or I have this Kickstarter campaign and I don't know how to make it successful. You guys know about Kickstarter? It's a crowdfunding. It's a program online where you can basically solicit donations for things, but you have to be able to be savvy enough to basically encourage people to come to your site, come back to your site, and to give you money. So they might come in and say, how do I pitch my product so that I'll actually make money off it? Or we had a really, really cool idea just a few weeks ago for a group that runs games. Like, those murder mystery dinners? Have you ever heard of those? They do that kind of thing, but they do it in the city. So it includes some sort of walking tour of the city, and they'll leave clues for people around the city, and you have to go from spot to spot to solve it. I loved that idea. I thought it was so cool. What a way to get to know a city, but to basically be forced to tour, and maybe you're on a date even, right? Like, you pay $40 or something, and you get a little meal in the middle, and you go on this tour and you solve clues, and it just takes you to places you wouldn't otherwise go. So they came in and they said, how can we make money off this? What are some ideas? That's the kind of thing that happens there, and you almost always leave the space feeling like you learned something. And if people didn't get that feeling, they wouldn't be coming back so often. I'm gonna flip to the next slide, because these give you some nice, these are some nice shots of our programs in action. So this here is Impossible Words, our literary salon. Right now I'm missing one with Hiromi Goto, who's a fabulous Vancouver author who just came into town for the World Fantasy Convention, and we caught her and we got her at Impossible Words. That's a reading for the Toronto Street Writers' final event, the magazine launch. This is a Test the Impossible down here, where some teachers who work with Minecraft. Have any of you ever heard of that video game? It's like an open source video game, but they brought it into their high school, and they have a video game club. And this is one of the teachers dressed up as the bad guy, the creeper from the video game. Up there, this is one of our partner. We have a lot of events with partner organizations. So that's Shameless Magazine, a girl, like a teen girl magazine. And it was the cutest day. They had bands of 13 and 14-year-old girls. They had formed rock bands, and there were 3 of them, and they were performing. So they would get up on stage and they'd be like, "We just wrote this song on the weekend." It was pretty funny, but like a lot of guts, a lot of chutzpah in there, and you could see the crowd. The songs weren't always 100% perfect, but you were like, right on, do it. Have that kind of guts, have that kind of power and strength and confidence in yourself. And up there is a Women in TO Politics event with all the Post-its, where they brought in, I'd say, about 50 local women who are interested in finding out more about the political process, and had a day of events. I think it was $20 and lunch was included. And one of the things that we did was we had an exercise on, what are the important issues to women, and why do you think our voices aren't heard as much in city politics? So everyone had to write them on Post-its and put them on the wall. So that just gives you an example of some of the stuff that happens there. We have social justice Aikido, self-defense classes twice a week, which essentially just is meant to encourage people. Like Aikido is a kind of self-defense that isn't like outwardly expressed. It's about protecting yourself. But I guess if you get good enough at it, other things can happen. I don't know, but mostly it's about being defensive, not offensive. So we do some of that because we thought, we're working our brains. We should be working our bodies as well. We have events, literary events for kids, fairly often through a group called Small Print. And it just are such a range of things. A lot of it has to do with the arts, a lot of it has to do with media, a lot of it has to do with technology, and a lot of it kind of crosses literacies. The literacies kind of overlap. Does that make sense? So a voice in local politics is important. So is a personal voice, speaking up, telling your own story. It kind of like layers, I guess, is the way to look at it. So we get this really interesting cross-pollination of people, say a youth who heard about street writers in a shelter where she was staying will come out to campaign school and actually get to ask a question of our local MP. Or, the other way around. We might have, okay, so there's one regular man who's a psychologist. He's on the cusp of retiring, and he comes out always to campaign school. But because of campaign school, he learned about some of the other things we're doing in the area of reading, like literary things. So he'll come out to Impossible Words and hear young voices, or the launch party for the Toronto Street Writers magazine, right? So you get this really interesting kind of invigorating range of voices and minds in one space. And that's how I grew up. I grew up in a family that was, you know, all generations, different cultures. My parents remarried. And to me, that's where I feel most comfortable. Like when the kids have the voice and our elders have voices, and, you know, it's not just about youth, it's not just about the people, you know, who look the same all speaking to each other. And I think we've pretty successfully managed that. We took the street writers' philosophy. This is the page with all of the text. Sorry, guys. But I just wanted to encapsulate some of the philosophies I had and that I passed on to the youth who are part of Street Writers. So no cost, no grades, no homework, which doesn't mean they don't work on things throughout the week, because they do. They'll write novels or screenplays or stories or massive amounts of poetry. No homework, only inspiration, and no judgment. So if I don't like hip-hop, if I hate hip-hop, I can't say that to a person who's writing hip-hop, right? I have to put myself in their shoes. If that's not the case, I actually do like hip-hop, just to clear the record. But if I didn't, I wouldn't say, oh, you're terrible, that's terrible. I have to put myself in this person's shoes and say, as a hip-hop artist, what are you doing really well? What could you learn more about? So what's interesting about that is, say, a formal poet might give advice to the hip-hop artist about poetic devices that they could bring into their work. And it's a really interesting back and forth. So my only real rules are to be respectful of each other and to listen when others speak or read. It really gets on my nerves if someone's reading and other people are just chattering, because it becomes a bit of a social space where people are just happy to see each other. It's like a family. And this next one is really my philosophy. I always try to give the benefit of the doubt. So even if I'm grumpy or you know, somebody's getting on my nerves or whatever, I have to just kind of go, I'll be happier if I approach this person in a way that assumes they're coming from a good place with a good heart and that kind of thing. And I have to say, and I was speaking to someone at lunch, actually, I don't know your name, but Margaret, I was saying that in the space with these youth, I've felt more safe than I do in most situations in my life. Like, honestly, you encounter, living in Toronto, you encounter many spaces and times that you as a woman don't feel safe. And because this is a space they value, the participants, they put time and energy into it, and they put love into it. So what you do is you come into the space where people are valuing, and you just have a sense that you're okay there, you're safe there, because it's not something they want to jeopardize. Other places maybe, but this is a place they want to be able to return to. And when they have that desire and that inclination, that kind of intent when they enter the space, it's very different than just any kind of random experience. So if people want extra writing help, we encourage people to create smaller groups, and the beautiful thing about having the Academy now is there's space and time for them to come back and work together in smaller groups, or to go to a local cafe and do it there. But the idea is that you come to Street Writers to meet like-minded people, people who want to write, people who want to read your stuff, and you go away and you can have these very intense kind of focused groups if you want to. Or ask me or one of the other mentors in the space. Oh, and I also joke that it's okay to ignore my exercise ideas. I don't really joke, it's true. I say, if it is boring to you, do something else. If I see you writing, I'll be happy. I don't care what you're writing. So if the exercise I've made up that day has to do with screenplay, and you never in a million years would want to write screenplay, well, first I encourage people to try, because it's surprising at times what comes out. But if they don't want to do that, if it's boring and they start playing on their phones, I'd rather see them drawing a comic. I'd rather see them doodling. I'd rather see them like coming up with a video game idea, right? Rather than just sitting there bored. So, yeah, so it's kind of a building up thing, really. After a while of being there, participants are asked to really get into the nitty-gritty of critiquing each other. And by that I don't mean just saying nice things. I mean telling people how they can make their writing better, or how they might make their writing better. It's not like you have to do this or it sucks. It's like, hey, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And really getting to the point where you feel enough trust for the people in the room that you're able to say, well, this is what I intended to do with my piece, but I'm going to set that aside now and listen to what other people have to say, and take that and feel confident enough in my own self that I'm able to do that. And sometimes they even come up with their own workshops, like the hip-hop artists, you know? Like, I don't do hip-hop, but if they come up with a fantastic workshop, I want them to run it, and I want it to be run by someone who's, you know, fluent in that artistic practice, not by me saying, okay, now everybody clap so you're doing a rhythm, right? Like, it's more about an organic process of coming from a place of knowledge and love. So we created a user manual to take these philosophies and apply them to the Academy of the Impossible. And who created that user manual? The street writers. So these are some of the pages. Everyone got a page in the user manual, and I just think they're so cool. I put them up all in one page here for you, but the idea is it's a little tiny book this size, and you get it when you become a member of the Academy. And these are kind of your guidelines for how to relate to the space and to people in the space. And I introduce yourself. It's hard to trust a stranger. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. And I still have trouble. I struggle with it. Forgive. You'll make mistakes too. Remain calm. And when I look at these pages, what I see is the individuals who wrote each of the pages, because I know them well enough. I know, like, who has something in their heart, you know? That violence, bullying, name-calling, and abuse are not allowed was written by a young woman who spent the last 10 years living in a shelter. She has mental disabilities, and she gets picked on a lot. And I know that she wrote it because she felt that didn't happen to her in this space. And she wants other people to treat each other that way. So the street writers may have written it, but the idea is that it applies to any program that's being run, any usage of the Academy. And yeah, that one, I put on my clown nose and everyone laughed with me and not at me. I just really like that idea too. You can be yourself, and you can be, you know, maybe a little loopy sometimes, or a little different, and we all know what that's like. Like, it's not about feeling like people are staring at you and pointing at you. It's about, like, yeah, that's okay. You know, if you're following this thing of being respectful to other people who are there and listening, just be yourself. And if you want to wear a clown nose that day, that's fine. So this all contributed to this idea of a knowledge commons, a space where people would come, because we have all heard the doom and gloom stories, and it's scary in many ways. As a writer, hearing about bookstores, small bookstores, and struggling, and bookstores struggling, and we were thinking a lot about this, and about, you know, many of the only places we go to learn are more traditional institutions that are very hierarchical, that are, you know, where people tell us what we have to know, what we ought to know. So we've been thinking about the Academy as a place where we go to share, more than specifically even to learn. It's about both, right? Like, it's about finding a community that can teach you and you can teach, investing in something. We've thought a lot about bringing the connectivity of the internet, all the networks, all the connections, to a public space, to a real-time scenario. So I may know, 125 experts in all these different areas, and you may know 603, and try to kind of bring the people I know to you and those people you know to me, and learn from them as much as possible. We have all kinds of speakers come in, and almost unilaterally I hear that it's one of the best talks they've done, not because of the number of people there, not because they're getting paid, but because of the kinds of questions they get asked, because of the response of the people in the room, the range of different voices, and the willingness to really just kind of give you the benefit of the doubt or ask you questions, that kind of thing. So we're building networks that respect difference and are sort of coming together based on shared interest and ways of seeing the world. So by ways of seeing the world, I think what I'm getting at is more the idea that we want to respect you for who you are, not make you into a mini-me. And just taking the time to be together, like this, like today. Taking the time to be together in a physical space is a big deal these days. We all have our kind of isolated places, and a lot of us spend our time in front of a computer, especially if we're of the writerly persuasion or the readerly persuasion, which I am both. So it's kind of a big deal for me to go and put myself out there, and I feel like I lose that ability sometimes. I'm so isolated, and I'm so behind my computer, and this forces me to stop doing that. And my life is qualitatively better because of that, because I actually see faces, because I actually get a hug, or I actually learn something, or I empathize with someone in a way that I wouldn't do if I just got like a two-sentence email, sorry, I'm not feeling well today, or something, right? That was another page of the guidebook, have an open mind, and I really like that, because we're asking everyone to do that. So that's actually the last slide, and I guess I might be finished maybe 5 or 10 minutes early. But what I wanted to do was really open the discussion up to you guys. I have a range of experience in everything from writing novels to editing textbooks to starting writing workshops to developing this fledgling nonprofit social business. I did a comic about girl pirates. I mean, I've done a lot of things. So I want you guys to feel free to ask me questions, to argue with me, to take issue with something I said today. I don't know, whatever. Does anybody, have any questions? Okay, there's 2 here.
I'd just like to know how you get the youth to initially engage. Because I can see once they're there and they have a voice and they become the voice, how powerful that could be, and how absolutely gratifying it could be for everybody in the room. That kind of, I'm a real idealist. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love it if we all could get away from our computers that we hide behind in our social media, Twitters and stuff like that make us distant. I'd rather be I'm a people person. Yeah. So, but I always am curious how you get the youth to engage initially, because my experience of working with at-risk youth for most of my career before I became a teacher and a facilitator was working with the at-risk youth who felt so disenfranchised and so not connected that taking the risk to come out to anything was
it is a risky thing, and you're asking for a lot from people who have often had experiences of having the door shut in their face.
The only thing that worked for me was free food.
Well, I do have free food. I do have free food.
Free food works.
Free food does help. In Toronto, having TTC tokens for people who need them helps as well. We're lucky enough to have a sponsor for our snacks. So I very quickly discovered they do not want chips and cookies. No way. They want like a healthy meal. And I also realized that the group went so much better if they ate at the beginning. So we were lucky enough to get a local diner that makes amazing organic food, actually. They came forward, they'd grown up in the neighborhood, and I actually got an email out of the blue saying, Emily, how can we help the youth of Parkdale? You know, both of the owners had grown up right in that area. And so we have this meal, which is, healthy sandwiches every week. And but that's not how we got them there. Like, it's not, I don't even know, it might be on the poster. I don't think it's on the poster. Food is on the poster. What we did to get youth out was go to where they hang out. And it's not just me going. I bring my program assistants who are youth. One is a hip-hop artist. The other is a young mother. She does a lot of journaling and writing about basically the issues in the neighborhood. So I'm much more likely to get youth out if I send them out. And they will say in their own words why they like the program. I've had these same program assistants there since the beginning as well. So they really know the program. Actually, one of them is a hip-hop artist who, as I said, who came in the first pilot, which was an 8-week program. And he did a workshop, and the response to him was so warm and enthusiastic that I asked him to be a program assistant in the second year. So that was how I hired 2 youth who represent the youth who come out. And they're the ones who often speak for the group. But not only that, they tell me where youth hang out. Youth who may feel disenfranchised, youth who may feel like they aren't welcome in most places, and frankly, even in the library. Like, there was a deliberate choice to hold it in the library because I kind of wanted to claim the space. And I wanted the youth to come in and to see us smiling and saying, you know, we want you here. It's not just the kids who are doing homework who are welcome at the library, right? So yeah, a lot of it is sending youth out to talk to youth. A lot of it is knowing the places that youth hang out, not expecting them to come to you, literally hoofing it around, talking to youth agencies, doing a lot of research. I also, I'm the type, I'd be like, so where are the kids who are skipping gonna hang out? Go into the alleyways. Go to that crusty bar on the corner and put something outside the crusty bar in the corner, that was my philosophy, though. It wasn't if you build it, they will come. It was more like, no. I'm going to them, and these are the youth that I want to come to my program and to feel like they're going to be greeted by someone who remembers them, probably from meeting them wherever they met them originally. But we're lucky enough now, I did no promotion basically this time. It's word of mouth. After 5 years, the youth who it was meaningful for are telling all their friends. So so I have 80 registrants, but I get every day 2 or 3 more. And the only promo we did this year was going into youth shelters and drop-in centers and putting a poster up in the shelter and drop-in center because I was finding that that sometimes it was more like people who have a lot of opportunities who would be most confident about approaching us. So I really wanted to go into spaces where there were youth who might not stick their necks out, the at-risk youth, as they're called, at-risk. Yeah. So, yeah.
Is the Academy open more than just Tuesday evenings?
Yeah, we have something almost every evening. We have street writers on Tuesdays. We have Aikido on Wednesday. We have Campaign School or Impossible Ideas, which is a bigger discussion series, on Thursdays. Fridays are often booked for for book launches or magazine launches or events of some kind. dance, we had films projected there. Saturday mornings is Aikido. Saturday afternoons is Impossible Words now. Sundays right now we have Writing is a Business, which is a small course run by, do you guys know The Grid, which is another, Entertainment Weekly in Toronto? One of the senior editors there. And we have Campaign School, which also is on Sundays or on Thursdays. And this is just right now. We've had things like film groups, we've had hip-hop groups, as I mentioned, we've had various different things, discussions on the future of health, discussions on all kinds of topics, whatever comes up that really... Oh, we had a junk band for quite a while on Sundays, started by one of the street writers who wanted to make music out of garbage, like out of things that people throw out. And I keep thinking, when I think of it, you got Fat Albert. Did you guys ever watch that cartoon? The Junkyard Band. I love that idea, reclaiming things and making music out of them. So it just depends on what's happening at that time of year and whatever people come forward with. Somebody's doing a course on podcasting soon. So the idea is it's not like everything in the kitchen sink, but we want people who have excellent ideas and who are so inspired to do things. And by excellent, I don't mean, the A+ course thing. I mean the junk band. Somebody who's like, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it, and I want this opportunity, and I couldn't do it anywhere else. So when people like that step up from within the community of people who have, maybe been to the space a few times, it's fairly easy to kind of shepherd them through into a kind of a more longer running program. So you had a question here.